Alright, guys, I was watching this movie Coherence the other night. It's a movie that I've seen before, but it's one of those movies where it's so convoluted that it just escapes your memory and you forget that you've watched it altogether. And then 10 years later, you're like, hell yeah, amazing, fantastic. And the reason I bring this up is because there was an interesting plot point in this film. And this is this idea of divergent timelines and every action kind of splitting the amount of possible realities that exist. And I found that quite captivating at the time, but it kind of fell by the wayside. And this has been a great reminder of the utility of this way of thinking. I'm not saying that it's an actual fact a real thing. What I'm saying is it has utility as a tool that you can use to think and to appreciate what you have in life, to guide your behavior and move you towards a more wholesome set of ethics. And I'm going to start out with this notion of difference, this notion of possible realities. Because fundamentally, we all have these moments where we felt we should have zigged when in fact we zagged. And for me, I think one of the formative ones was when I was 17 and I crashed my car. And what happened is my mum had bought me a car, just a starter car, a little old Toyota Corolla. And a lot of my friends at the time were kind of reckless and they would, drift their front wheel drive Corollas as well by pulling hand brakies. In America, I guess you'd call it the emergency brake, and spinning out the back side of the car. And I decided that I was going to do it around a hairpin corner at about 40 kilometres, so not terribly fast, but probably too fast for the conditions because it had been raining and the surface was wet. And what happened was it overspun to one side. It looked like I was going to be heading towards a bank. I freaked out, and then I saw a cat bolt across the road, and I overcorrected to the other side, and the steering column locked up. And I was now heading towards a bank. Many meters of a drop. Probably would have ended up in the hospital if it wasn't for a tree. One tree planted halfway down this bank, and my car sailed off over the bank and went straight into the tree. And I landed on perhaps a 50-degree angle, so the car was like this into the tree, and the tree trunk came all the way up to the windscreen. And I was in shock as I looked down meters upon meters at the ground below, thinking if it wasn't for that tree, I'd be in hospital, man. So what did I do? I freaked out. I had all this adrenaline running. I forced my way outside the passenger door, climbed up over the top of the car and back onto the bank, and I bolted home. And of course, by the time I got there and told my mother what had happened, she took me right back down to the scene of the crime. And there was an ambulance, there was a fire engine, there was a dog unit of police out there looking for me. And as it happened, I had the most lovely police officer I've ever encountered. He was so understanding and compassionate, and he took me aside, he got my story, and he said, all right, you can go sit in the back of your mum's car now. And he had a quiet word with her, and then that was that. And the next day, she broke the news to me that I was being charged with reckless driving. Fair enough. But this guy had said to her, hey, look, he's obviously been through a lot. Don't tell him today. Just let him rest, recover, and, find a moment tomorrow to break the news to him. It's not going to be serious. He'll probably get diversion, and that'll be that. And in my country, diversion's a thing where on your first offence, you don't get a criminal record. It goes through the courts and then they waive it, basically. You might have to pay a small fine, whatever, but it doesn't stick. And so I was very grateful for that, but at the same time, I was pissed off with myself because I had lost this great source of social capital, right? As a teenager, having a car when a lot of your friends don't makes you a slightly more important person. And now I lost that. And there was no way I was going to get bought another car. I had to figure this whole thing out on my own from now on. An important lesson for a young kid. But as the weeks draw on, I couldn't shake this notion of, gosh, what if I had just not done that stupid act of trying to drift my car? In the end, you can't change that future. That future is set in stone. And there's limited utility, I think, in ruminating on what-ifs, potential futures that didn't eventuate. But what it does have value in is when you encounter those situations which are near misses, where your decision making led to something that avoided that dire result, where you didn't allow yourself to rise to your baser instincts. And it's in those moments that you can find an opportunity for gratitude. For instance, if you accidentally pull out too soon in front of a bunch of cars and then you slam on the brakes and you realize, hey, if I'd gone then, something could have gone very, very wrong. And then for the rest of the day, you can have this feeling of ease and gratitude and a sense of appreciation that you've still got your car with its heated seats and its air conditioning while it's 5 degrees outside. And that feeling is worth $1 million because you zagged when you should have zagged instead of zigging when you should have zagged. Sometimes you have to find the appreciation in the correct decisions that you make. I'm going to give you another example too, because when I was younger, I used to feel like whenever somebody challenged me in some kind of masculine way, whether it was at a bar and they were just trying it on because I'm a tall guy, but I'm not exactly well built. So I'm an imposing figure in some sense, but also, insecure men can look at me and go, yeah, I could probably take this guy. And so I've had multiple situations in bars where people have tried that on. They've tried the aggressive alpha male kind of, I'm going to do something to insult your mana, your respect, and I'm going to see what happens. And if you don't do anything, you've dropped nuts, as we say in New Zealand. And so I used to banter back. I used to quip back. I used to stand my ground. And it got me into a couple of situations which could have gone quite badly. Fortunately, it didn't. But my point is this. Now when I'm a bit older and I'm in my 30s, I look upon those situations and I'm like, man, that could have gone so much worse. If in a sense, I was just lucky that it didn't. Because there are plenty of stories in my hometown of people being smartasses back to somebody who's being aggressive and then winding up in hospital, winding up catching a charge, winding up losing the most important thing, losing their lives. There was a guy at my local McDonald's, which used to be a 24-hour. And in my town, we used to have a really thriving party culture in the bars and the clubs all around this one piazza, this one square that we have. It's actually octagonal shaped. It's called the Octagon. We're very inventive. And everybody would filter back from this once all the bars closed to go to Macca's to get their sort of late night drunken feed. And this one guy got into a bit of a verbal altercation with this other guy, and things settled down a little bit. And then when he had his back turned, he got king hit in the head. And a king hit is when somebody, they knock you in the back of the head without you noticing. And he collapsed, and he hit his head on the way down on a balustrade or a pillar. And that was it. That was lights out. The ledger on his life had closed. And I think about that from time to time. And it makes me feel like those situations just aren't worth it. We have this thing in our head that it's an insult to our manly pride and respect and everything else. And being disrespected means that you have to rise up and show your manliness, show your masculine energy. But I'm not so sure that it does. Who are we trying to prove that to? Another example, and this has nothing to do with spouting off and rising to that. There was an MMA fighter at City Kickboxing in Auckland, very, very famous martial arts school, has produced some world champions in kickboxing and in MMA. And this guy was a storied fighter, but he was out drinking, and some guy came up and king hit him in the back of the head. And that was it for him too. The ledger closed on his life. And it's a tragedy. And those situations make me think, well, we need to consider that thing from coherence, those divergent pathways, because I guarantee both of those people would look at those situations and go, well, I'd rather have zagged when I should have zagged. And this whole thing, it touches on the idea of responsibility, because the thing is, if you're going to rise to those occasions, you're in a sense being irresponsible. You're putting your pride before the responsibility that you have to your friends, to your family, to your workplace, to your mentors, to your ability to become something great. And over what? Over a guy that you don't know and you don't care about saying something provocative to you. And I think an important caveat here is that that's not to say you should be a coward. That's not to say that there aren't situations where you do have to stand up for yourself. Absolutely. Otherwise people are going to roll all over you. But it's also in part the way you carry yourself. And I think if you carry yourself with a certain degree of respect, you're minimizing those opportunities. And there is also a way to carry yourself out of those situations with your respect intact, because it doesn't really matter what they say. It really doesn't. It matters how you react, whether you buy into what they say, whether you let it get under your skin. And so this idea of divergent realities based upon an action, it can actually guide you towards a more responsible attitude to life. And I think that's the main thing that I've taken away from this film, Coherence. And I would recommend that everybody watch it. Fantastic film. Okay, that's all for now.